All right, this is probably going to be the last update for this build, as I don't feel like there's a ton more you can really get out of this. I mean, you could see from the video, it can already kill all the bosses, it can do all the content, right? You can definitely push the build farther than I have. I mostly just haven't pushed it because it's like just a lot of currency at that point to really push it harder than I have. But saw from the boss kills compared to the previous videos, there are comets in my current version of the build. I have a second barrier invocation here just for dropping comets for single target damage. You saw in the boss kills, like some of the times I wasn't even really commenting and still killing bosses, right? So I don't think this is needed. The extra spirit that you're gonna end up having from all the health you have, it can be spent in a couple ways. I think one of them is this, a Comet Barrier Invocation. You could also run Blasphemy with like Temporal Chains, or you could even put Conductivity in Blasphemy, but I wouldn't really recommend that. You lose a lot of value from doing that. So you could run like Temporal Chains or Enfeeble or something like that. But yeah, you do end up with a bunch of extra spirit. How you end up using that is kind of up to you, and that's gonna kind of be the theme of this video a lot, is that once you're like super late game, there's less of like a cookie cutter build I can give you, and you're gonna kind of have to make some decisions on your own, like whether you want to run this barrier invocation or Blasphemy, or you know, something else like Arctic Armor and something else, or whatever you decide. I think they're all completely viable and fine. But you can see on the Comet that I'm running here, it's entirely just for single target damage. It's Concentrated Effect, Cold Mastery, Echo, and Elemental Focus. This Barrier Invocation Comet is not self-sustaining. You can't actually self-sustain Barrier Invocation without running Capacitor on it. So I mean, you can see right now I just overflowed my Infernal Flame, right, and it's still not charged. If I do it again, now it's charged. If I push it, it does not generate enough energy to sustain itself. The way I sustain it is with Spark. I just keep holding down the Spark Barrier Invocation, and then I can spam Comets during it. This does require me to use like multiple buttons, so there is that. While I'm spamming Q, which is what my Barrier Invocation is on, it's kind of hard for me to move around. You could put it on a mouse button, right, and then it would be easier. But it does add a lot of, I don't know, more button presses, I guess. This is being converted with a ring that I'm running, Whisper of the Brotherhood. So all the cold damage that I'm doing is being converted to lightning. So this This Comet does 100% lightning damage. Well, it does a little bit of chaos too, but that's something else entirely. It does all lightning damage, right? There's no cold damage. You could switch this and run Call of the Brotherhood, which makes all lightning damage cold. And then instead of conductivity, you'd run hypothermia. But I think that lightning damage is much better than cold, because all cold gives you is freeze, right? And freeze is just a stun. But there's already a stun in the game. It's called stun. You just stun stuff, right? Why do you need a second stun? I'd much rather have shock, which makes you do more damage. I don't think the cold is good or worth it. I think everything being lightning is much better. But yeah, so this does all lightning damage with this, so we can only run one curse, so we don't have to worry about multiple element types, blah blah blah. Just have one type. We can then curse it and expose, and it's way easier to run. It's way more simple. If you do decide not to run Comet and just run Blasphemy or something like that, then you don't need a ring, right? So you can drop this and run another rare ring, which will end up netting you way more rarity, because then you can get to, like, you know, 50% plus rarity rings, and you'll have what, like 200? Like, I have 162, so my rarity is pretty high, but you could definitely push this higher. You just drop this, or you could also just not care and run cold damage on your Comet. You're gonna lose out on single target damage and stuff that way, but I don't think it really matters that much. Other than that, the skills are about the same. I mean, the main Spark Barrier Invocation hasn't changed, right? You run this from the get-go whenever you can, pretty much, because having your primary damaging ability maxed out as soon as possible is obviously very good. Orb of Storms is still our lightning expose and a main shock. It does have the overcharge, so it has a higher magnitude. How much this actually applies shock, I don't know. We have conductivity here. If you're having issues with conductivity landing on bosses, let's say when a boss is spawning, you cast conductivity too early and you miss, right? So the curse goes off before the boss is active. You could run Curse Ground here, but then you have to worry about if the boss moves, then they're no longer going to be cursed. So whatever works for you best here, this is up to you. You could run Curse Ground, you could not. Next, let's talk about the finished skill tree. So this is a level 95 skill tree. For the most part, compared to the other skill tree I have posted, is pretty much just goes out and gets some jewels, and that's like it. We get on here and get refills as well because we have the points for it. But otherwise, the skill tree is more or less the same, right? We go get Dynamism because you're most likely going to need this. If you don't, then don't take it. It's really up to you. The biggest thing with this skill tree here that we're gonna run into is running a Megalomaniac gem, which is something you'll eventually want to pick up in the late game. One of these. There'll be a link with a market search for this. You're really gonna have to look at these and figure out which ones are actually good and which ones are not. I'm gonna have a lot of notables on the search for it, and some of them are not worth picking up. Like, for example, I'll just show you two that I know is on the link, right? I have Essence of Storm and Essence of the Mountain on the market, but you probably wouldn't want to buy a Megalomaniac with both of these, and that's it, because it's not that strong. My Megalomaniac has a Combat Alchemy and Pure Chaos. Combat Alchemy is pretty decent, 20% recovery and 10% to not consume. It's okay. It's good for flash sustain and stuff like that. And then I have Pure Chaos, which is a pretty decent chunk of gain damage. It's Chaos, so it's not affected by all of my elemental gems and whatnot. Like, I have a couple of, you know, most of my jewels have like elemental damage on them, right? So this isn't affected by it, but it is affected by our spell damage in demon form multiplier, so it's still fine. 11% is pretty good. This is the only source of gain I have, I think. So it's just like an 11% damage increase overall. So I mean, it's pretty good. It's pretty strong. Another change you could make to the tree, and I think this might actually have value, I was talking about spirit in the little previous segment. You could, once you're super high gear, drop Baidat's Will completely and just not run extra spirit. But if you were to do that, you would have to run spirit on your amulet, which isn't that big a deal because the prefixes on our amulet aren't super great. Our amulet's not amazing to begin with, but you'll have, like, the only things the prefixes are life, energy shield, life, energy, like that's it, right? It's just life and energy shield. And spirit's a prefix, so you could easily fit it onto your amulet, and then you would not have to run Baidat's Will, which would end up giving you a lot of EHP, right? Because my Baidat's Will is eating what, 450 HP, and you're not going to get that much HP from an amulet unless you get a really big, like, percent shield roll or something. Then it will be. But I think that does definitely have value. Again, and this is my tree. This is not the tree I recommend. And when I said earlier about having to make your own decisions, and right, I can't give you a cookie cutter anymore, this is kind of what I'm talking about. Right now, I don't have Ingenuity. Right? I elected to skip Ingenuity because I wanted to go get Pliable Flesh. Most people probably can't skip Ingenuity and Proficiency because you won't have the stats to run the build. So most likely you're going to need Ingenuity, so that's going to be what's on the PoB for this, because you will most likely need this. If you don't end up needing this, then, you know, you can try for Pliable Flesh, or you can go get Branching Bolts, or, you know, there's a bunch of stuff you could potentially get that's a lot of damage. Like Wild Storm's also a pretty big damage increase. The thing we can't really get more of realistically is Jewel Sockets. So yeah, I mean, if you wanted to, you could even just go get these nodes, the life recovery nodes here. If you can drop one of these jewels, if you don't need these stat nodes, you could go grab these as well, because this is more life recovery than you'll get from socketing a gem. Even if you have if you have a 100% adorned and a perfectly rolled Emerald of Recovery, then these will be equal value for recovery, right? 3 points for 30%, and this will be 3 points for another 30%. But I'm gonna guess most people watching this video probably don't have a 100% adorned, because they're like 400 div last I checked, which maybe they've gone up more, maybe they've gone down, I don't know. You probably don't have one. So these are like pretty good value nodes here. If you can give up some stats, you can go grab these. They're good. I did pick up these nodes here. These are actually really good value. 10% charges and then 30% recovery for 3 points. They're very, very strong. But yeah, other than that, I mean, the tree's not much different. It's like, yeah, it's just, you just go get sockets from the starter build. And that's it. So gear wise, I have changed some stuff. I've picked up, as you saw earlier, I picked up a ton of rarity on all my stuff. I think realistically, you probably want 100 to 150% rarity. That seems to be the sweet spot that everybody's shooting for. You'll want a Fine Belt for Flash Sustain, which is not something we talked about previously on the like starter build of this. For like doing pinnacle bosses and stuff, you really need to be able to just flask and it not expire without you getting additional flash charges from killing mobs. You need to be able to just flask 100% of the time, which is very possible. I can do it with my stats. I do have a lot of duration from my adorned jewels. I have, I think, two duration jewels, and then a flask with reduced charges per use is extremely strong. I think this reduced charges per use is way stronger than the gain additional charges per second suffix. I think it's usually cheaper too, unless you get a really high rolled one, then it's very expensive. But I'm pretty sure the reduced charges per use is a stronger suffix than the passive charge gain. I think realistically, the only other spell this really works with is probably Arc. Arc does pretty good damage. It's definitely not as good as Spark, but it's still pretty decent, especially if you can get the level up really high. Because it does, the thing with Arc is it does more damage for each remaining chain, right? So for single target, it actually does a rather large amount of damage. But again, its big drawback is that it's a relatively close range spell, whereas Spark will just be killing everything on the map from a screen length away. So it's a lot more dangerous to use, but it also doesn't completely lag you out. So if you can't run Spark because you're playing on a console or a lower end machine or whatever, the server and client performance is way too bad playing Spark, Arc definitely would work. Another thing that literally what I was thinking about while I was making this video is maybe you can run Hex Blast with this too, right? So if I don't run the second Barrier Invocation, I can run Blasphemy, and then I can run Hex Blast. Is that actually good? I don't know. The thing with Hex Blast is it's super expensive. It's like really expensive. So I don't know how the loop would work with that. But maybe it's something you can do. Seems cool. Who knows? I've said this in my last videos about the low life versus like high life build. You can see here, I'm literally just standing on shock ground spamming. My ES recovery is high enough that for like most of the time, my ES recovery actually completely handles this. But in situations where it does spiral more than normal, I'm not exactly sure the exact mechanics on how Barrier Invocation even works, honestly. In your own shock ground, for some reason, it definitely can spiral up higher than I would think it'd be able to. And like right there, you can see I'm actually dipping into health. If I had, you know, 200 max life or whatever, then I would immediately die. But because I have life, I can just stand here on this shock ground and like nothing bad will happen. I will say, for some reason, standing on shock ground absolutely dumpsters your frame for FPS. I have no idea why, but it does some real bad stuff, and it does even worse stuff when you actually get down into like health. Something with the way that this is being calculated really absolutely doo-doos on client performance. But yeah, this is prime example of why you don't run low life, because shock ground is no danger to you if you have a life pool. That's it. Same with getting shocked randomly by mobs.